I woke up to a dark, rainy day on the Sunshine Coast today. So for this tutorial, we are going to paint a moody, stormy, barren landscape. We are going to paint this very fast and very loose. And I have my board tilted up on about a 20-degree inline. So the natural flow of the water running down the page will help us get that rainy, stormy feel. I've got 3 colors out for this piece: burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, and Paynes Grey. The techniques we're going to use in this piece are primarily wet on wet to do our initial stormy cloud shapes, and then we're going to do a dry brush technique to enhance the lines of the rain coming down and to do our landscape at the bottom. I'm going to start by wetting my entire piece of paper, and I've got this big flat brush here that I'm going to use for the entirety of the piece. Once your whole piece is nice and wet, I'm going to put a base layer down of our burnt sienna. Just nice and rough. The bottom of our piece here is going to be the dry, barren landscape once we get to the end. And I'd like to get some warm tones poking through those clouds. Now, working fast to make sure our paper stays wet, I'm gonna load my brush up with some Paynes Grey, and I want to keep quite a wet consistency still so that we can get the running down the paper effect we're going for. And I'm gonna start just swiveling my paint around. And I can lift it up even more to get more of an effect going. I'm going to add some ultramarine into the mix now. Add in some darker Paynes Grey. Nice and loose. Just keep adding color wherever you feel. And let the water and the paper do the work for you. you can paint straight across our little horizon to neaten this up here. And I'm just going to watch it, how it moves as it dries, before going back in and adding a bit more paint. I'm going to grab some more Paynes Grey on my paintbrush and just go and play with some of these shapes a bit more. Now this time using a bit more pigment and a bit less water because our paper is quite wet now. I'll load up with more Paynes Grey. Just adding to those shapes, really, really loose, letting the paper move the paint. And create more of that look for me. If you want, you can wash the brush and just sprinkle a little bit of water back in. Get a bit of movement going again up in the top there. While it's still wet, you can keep adding colours to your heart's content. Gonna add in a bit more warmth into these clouds. More burnt sienna. And feel free to keep moving the board around. You can lift it up, you can tilt it around, you can tilt it on its side. Get the colours moving in a different way. Gonna streak some more blue up the top here. Once you've been working it for a while, it's good to step back and let it dry rather than try and keep adding and overwork the piece too much. So I'm gonna go have a little coffee break while this dries, and I'll see you back here soon. Now this is looking pretty moody so far, but if you want to add a bit more dramatic rain into these clouds, you can do a dry brush technique. So I've washed my brush, made sure it's pretty dry so the bristles start to separate a little bit. And I'm going to add a bit more Paynes Grey to my brush. And I'm going to wipe it a little bit to test. And then I'm just going to follow some of these lines that have been created here. And without thinking too much, I'm just going to add some quick strokes down the page to make it look a bit like rain. Now my paper is just a tiny bit wet still, so it'll help just blend these strokes into the rest of the painting rather than have them sitting on top. If you want them to blend away more, you can do this step while the paper is still quite wet. If you want that more defined stroke look, wait until it's pretty much completely dry and then come in and do your strokes. Now I'm keeping my brush quite nice and dry as well. I'm just always testing it on my bit of paper towel here. And I'm mainly painting them all the same way. I'm going to add a little bit more dramatic color into the bottom of this cloud here. Then I'm going to dry my brush off again and just use the wet paint I put there to gently drag down the page. I'm also going to go back in the top and just add a bit more of those darker colors back in, because watercolor does tend to dry lighter than how you originally put it on. I always love adding a few little water splats back into my pieces. And then just watch and see how the color moves around as it dries. I'm going to sit back and let it dry again, and then we'll come in and paint our landscape down the bottom. Okay, we are back with nice dry paper. You can see once the colors have dried, we've got this beautiful watercolor edging here in our clouds. So now we're going to paint a basic landscape down the bottom here. So I'm going to use the dry brush effect again. So I'm going to load my brush with some burnt sienna. And if your colors have become mixed up on your palette in the process of this painting, even better. We can use a combination of all the colors in our landscape. Now I'm just going to paint straight across the page here. Keep loading my brush up when necessary. So I just want a really rough, impressionistic look. I'll get multiple colors in there if I can. I'll tidy up this horizon a little bit by just using my brush on the side like this. I'm going to get some of the Paynes Grey in the mix. Just keeping this whole thing nice and loose. Even if I spill a little bit of ultramarine in there, that will give a nice effect. And that is where I am going to leave it, nice and loose. To finish off, I'm going to clean my brush and just add a few streaks of water. While that dries, I'm going to come back in with a round number 12 brush and just add a little bit more of those dark colors in the top here. I'm just going to create some shapes. Gonna get some more burnt sienna back into these clouds here. Before I overwork it too much, I'm gonna put the brush down. Now to add a few finishing touches to this piece, I'm gonna clean and dry my brush once again. I'm going to load it up with a little bit of the Paynes Grey. Using the dry brush technique, just add a little bit more dark into our landscape, just to balance out our sky and our ground a little bit. Again, I'm not being too precise. And to finish off, I'm going to get a smaller brush and just add a little farm hut and a windmill in this corner here. So I've picked up a 00 brush here and just using the colors that are already on my palette. I'm going to use the burnt sienna mixed already with the Paynes Grey to get a nice darker brown color. A little farm shack, braving the storm. Some other tools I like to have on hand doing watercolor are some fine line markers. I have a black, this one is a small or 0.3 tip, great for little details, but sometimes black is just too black. So I've also got a brown, so this brown is double tipped. It has a round tip that comes to a point on one end and a more solid fine tip on the other, which we're going to use to finish off our hut and our windmill. I might use a combination of these two to add some light and dark into the hut and windmill. If you don't have any pens on hand or you just prefer to use a paintbrush, you can just load up some thicker paint and come back in to finish the details that way. I'm just going to really almost crosshatch the details on this barn. I'm just gonna smudge the bottom of this farmhouse ever so slightly to not make it so harsh. And there we have it, our moody, rainy day painting. The cool thing about this piece, if you were to do it a dozen times, it would come out completely different every time. I hope you had fun doing this piece with me, and I would love to know how you went in the comments. I would really appreciate it if you gave this video a like, and if you haven't already, hit subscribe and let's paint together again next time. I'm gonna go enjoy the rest of this rainy afternoon. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.